All right, welcome to the other interview by Connected Leadership, where we're having real conversations from practitioners and from experts in the field of leadership. Of what does it mean to be restoring human connection in the workplace? And today, I'm very excited. I have Lorena from Relay. I've met Lorena through mutual connections in the tech world of Toronto, which is much smaller than a lot of people, I think. And I think you're connected to most people through at least one connection. And Lorena really picked my interest. I feel like I was a creep following her on LinkedIn because she was very authentic in her career journey and how she's thinking about building culture in some of the startups and scale up companies in the Toronto market. And also, I love that she took a career break at some point and she was very vulnerably courageous talking about it and how she thinks about the company, the culture, and some of the business that they're building at Relay. And she has the most fascinating background in my experience, where she used to be also an entrepreneur and she comes from an investor world. So I couldn't wait to have you on, Lorena. So welcome. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Wow, it gave me chills. That's very kind of you.
So Lorena, tell us just, a quick intro on kind of where you at right now and what's your focus these days.
As you mentioned, I've had an interesting career journey. So I'm actually Colombian born and raised, and studied finance and entrepreneurship in my educational background, and then married a Canadian and ended up in Toronto and was able to reimagine a different career and a different career path, both spending some time continuing investing and being an investor, and then also transitioning to being an entrepreneur, a very unsuccessful entrepreneur, and learning a lot through the trials, tribulations, and failures of that journey, and then turning the last, goodness, I guess I have a 12-year-old son that would have sort of matched when I moved into being part of scale up. So for the last decade plus, been part of different startups and scale ups, different stages, some very much focused on the Canadian market, others more global, but always grounded in sort of building, scaling people, operations. And it's been a lot of fun and a lot of learning.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right now, I understand your role is not just people and culture. It's also the customer experience, right? And operations.
Yeah, so I actually started off with when I moved into an operating role to have a pretty broad mandate. So was at a photography community and marketplace and was responsible from everything from finance to customer support and experience, legal, and also people. So I really stumbled into people as a result of kind of having a finance background. And then there was this need for someone to take that role on, and then raising my hand and saying, I'd like to learn and give it a go, and having people that were really kind enough to sort of be my mentor and be able to ask questions and learn through their experiences. But I very much learned the people aspect, at least, on the job. And then operations has sort of always been part of my mandate in some capacity. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's again, love hearing kind of like non-linear path of how people end up in different careers, because we're used to like, oh, I went to school for this, so now I have to do this. And then, if we see like, oh my God, how am I gonna, even if I'm interested in another thing and I'm learning about myself, that I'm getting pulled into a different direction, we don't see enough examples of the switches. So we start doubting ourselves of like, what is it possible? And we always feel like it has to be a step back. Like, oh, if I was to switch to HR field now, I have to start in the bottom, but I've climbed so far, already. Were you looking at your portfolio, I would say, in different chapters? It doesn't seem to be the case. You're like reinventing yourself in all these other ways and just kind of moving along in a way.
Yeah, I think it was, I got really lucky that people were kind enough to believe in me and take some level of risk. And I, in return, said, I'm going to go be curious, learn, be creative, look at problems differently. And so it ended up that I found places that trusted me enough to go figure it out, and problem statements that I could take my finance and my operations backgrounds and turn them into, whether it be people strategies or customer experience strategies. So I think there's only so much that skills will bring. It's also sort of what or your experience that will bring. It's also like your appetite to learn or how you show up in those growth moments. And I've just
Mhm.
been really fortunate that I've been able to have those moments or those opportunities and enjoyed them thoroughly. Yeah.
Right. Well, it sounds like the level of lack met your level of staying curious, adaptable, you know, willing to learn, and like your level of effort.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to learn more, and I don't think that you hit the ceiling on learning. I think there's an opportunity every day to rethink how you operate or to learn from somebody else or to teach somebody, and in teaching or mentoring or coaching, you in exchange learn something as well. So I think I definitely got that from my father. He's a learner, he's still learning, and he's in his 80s. And it's such a part of what drives me.
Right. Well, that's where we're going to go. But I do want to ask you, just because I know there's a lot of people are going through a little bit of reinvention. There's been a number of reductions in the workplaces. I think even post COVID, it's kind of created that forced self awareness in a way where we were locked in, and it really made us reflect on our values. And there have been lots of changes in the office, out of the office, where people, I find the awareness of what I want for my life has gone up. And so I find people are at the crossroads of like, oh, maybe it's not what I wanted to do. Maybe I want to do completely something different. And given that you've had different chapters, maybe there is a piece of wisdom or advice you could give to people who find themselves in that position.
That's a hard one for me to answer. I think if I were to try to, offer up any advice, I think it would be that it's okay to be uncomfortable. Every time I have stepped outside of my comfort zone, whether it's a different role, a different company, a different country, I've lived in 3 different countries now over the course of my life. I've had many different roles. I feel like those moments where I just sort of was courageous enough to just recognize that there was fear, but just go anyway and do it, has always led me down a beautiful path. Now, it doesn't mean it wasn't a hard path, but it's always been a good path nonetheless. And so I would just say, yeah, be courageous and like put yourself in uncomfortable situations and take that leap of faith. Believe in yourself. I think maybe that's ultimately what it is. It's just believe in you and go somewhere that will challenge you.
Yeah. I heard a couple more things you said is like, kind of believe in you and know that the path can lead to something wonderful, even if it's not what you thought. Because
Yeah.
there's something you said earlier about, well, entrepreneurship was fun, wasn't as successful as I thought, you
No, it
know?
was epically unsuccessful. Call it what it was. I was not, but I learned a lot and it changed my
Right, right. And then that likely opened the other doors for you,
yes.
right? Exactly. So it's like you have to believe in yourself that, and you have to match if you're switching kind of level with a level of flexibility and curiosity to make sure you're learning and you applying the strengths. And I'm hearing from you a lot of strengths are transferable. And I'm sure all of your background is always useful in all other roles. And also that you're saying kind of take the path, let it be uncomfortable, let it be hard, and trust that there will be a beautiful outcome
Yes.
at
Yes.
some point.
Yeah.
All right, I'll switch gears a little bit just because relay
Mhm.
really surprised me in this pleasant way for a person who believes in, like really leadership development. I honestly felt like there's not much space for this in the world of tech. I felt a little bit jaded by tech in the last, many years. I felt that, especially since the budgets, were starting to get a cut after, just a couple years ago when the budgets kind of all shrunk, it really felt like people don't care about leadership development and people development as much as they say. Or it felt like people talked about learning cultures and investing in their people, but it didn't feel like always their actions followed the
Yeah.
story they tried to project. And we have so many stories, honestly, in tech of like toxic leadership and burnout and so on. And it was really refreshing for me personally to see a posting about, I think it was a year ago, from Relay and from you when I think I don't know if you were like a year or 6 months into your job, and there was a posting for internal coach.
Mhm.
You know how they say you almost fall out of your chair? I'm pretty sure I like literally jumped on my chair when I saw this on LinkedIn
Yeah.
because it was really surprising to me. And I found it surprising because of the stage the company is at, right? And because I just don't often see people being able to put a number on this investment that early in the organization. And so I would love to chat with you how you guys went, why you thought about the coaching program, why you thought it was important at that stage of the company, and how you went about it and some of the value and lessons learned you're seeing from it now.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot there on the coaching journey. So maybe I'll start from the beginning. So I think you're 100% right that you have to choose the right place and partner with the right leaders that would even be open to the conversation of investing in a coach when we were 60 people when I said to Yusuf, our CEO and co-founder, that this was a key and critical investment that we needed to make. And there was no debate on whether it was important. It was more like how should we go about doing it? That we debated and really there was sort of an animated discussion on how to do this successfully and effectively and to deliver the kind of the best impact for our team. So I feel very fortunate to have found a place like Relay and at the stage that we were at. So one of the things that really attracted me to join a Series A now or a Series B company is that I could have a lot more influence around the programs and the investment that we made, having learned so much from other organizations that I had been a part of. And this was something that I had always wanted to do. Internal coaching, not bringing in kind of these one-off leadership programs or kind of, one-time consultants that didn't understand the business context, didn't understand the team and culture, and weren't really embedded in the real life of Relay
Mm,
to offer this leadership development or these coaching programs. And so I think both the leaders that exist today and their approach to building a world-class culture and also the stage were so perfectly aligned that so I joined Relay formally in August of last year, and we started hiring for this role in September. So it was a very much sort of a real time, like, what do we think needs to be true in 2024 that will allow us to be have a strong culture and also have a business that continues to grow and scale. And so coaching was central to that. I have admired companies that have built coaching programs early in-house. So we didn't do anything. I mean, we have other great examples of those, even in Toronto, that have been that have had this hypothesis. And I think we just wanted to sort of mirror that and also put in the relay flair. And so one of our core values, for example, is get 1% better. And that's sort of a learning, a learner's mindset, a lot of humility and curiosity embedded in that. But to get 1% better every day requires feedback. It's really inherent or incumbent upon the getting better is, somebody taking the time to really give you feedback and help you improve in your craft. And so we actually wanted to make our people leaders, which we use sort of interchangeably with managers, for them to be great coaches. And so what was the level of investment that would be required to make our people leaders effective coaches? We'll bring in a senior coach, develop a program, the strategy around that. And so we actually started off by focusing only the coaching program on people leaders and not the
mm,
skills of the skills on how to have better feedback conversations, absolutely. How to have difficult conversations, how to have development plans for their folks, like the whole gamut. Also, how you show up as a leader. Because what I have found or what we have found, especially at Relay, is like what we're asking of our people leaders is basically to change how they operate almost every quarter, because that's how quickly the business is evolving and changing and growing. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's a really big ask.
mhm,
And so, could we bring in a coach, and we're bringing in more coaches this quarter to help our leaders kind of how do you show up as your best self? Like, what are your trigger moments and how do you respond in those trigger moments? How can we just make you not the skills of like how to write better code or a better kind of marketing campaign? It's really like, how do you show up as a human for another team member and constantly like challenge the what you're thinking around how you lead as Relay grows. So it's been, I said a lot there, but it's been a really remarkable journey.
Wow. All right. So let's unpack it. I'm thinking like, I'm right away thinking like process, like, okay, so getting buy-in, let's start there. And then we'll start with like the key components. So getting buy-in, like how can one, what do you think would set them up for success to get buy-in to develop, to hire an internal coach and develop coaching program? Like what maybe some KPIs that you've seen the impact on or some outcomes that you were able to link to help them to build the case?
I mean, at Relay, as part of the people team, there's like two buckets. And like, how do we hire incredible talent? And how do we retain that incredible talent? And so the lagging indicators of an effective coaching program or the ROI would be retention rates, internal mobility, and promotion. But there's, you could attribute a number of things to people staying and people getting promoted and kind of growing from within. And so we then sort of like unpacked what are the activities that we expect managers to do. And so it's like frequency of one-on-ones and develop, the actual development of growth plans. And so we're we're tying kind of the impact of the work that we're doing to actual day-to-day activities so that we're changing the way a manager operates and the rituals in order to we think have it be kind of the long-term impact. I think a lot of organizations today have learning and development stipends, right? So they'll post on their pages or on their career sites, like, well, you'll have $5,000 that you can allocate to, to a learning, a class or a conference. And we wanted to say, let's pool all those dollars and create more of a system that
Okay.
scales, that has more of an unlock, meaning it's not a one-time event. It's something that can be recurring, that changes habits. And so I don't know if I'm actually answering your question because I think the ROI for a coaching program is more difficult to outline. What we wanted to do was show behavioral change in the day to day. And as a result of that, shifting in relationship between a people leader and their employee or their direct report or their team member, being able to say, look, like we're actually, retaining folks more, whether it's in the first year or on the longer term.
Right. Well, I think you're fairly putting it back into the behaviors because, in my opinion, the behaviors is the leading indicator. Like when you already, by the time it gets to the performance in a way, like you've already missed the time, right? It's great. Like if you miss the performance, that's already too late, right? The behaviors is what in the future will lead to performance. And so you're saying, we decided on the culture we wanted to have. That's kind of what I heard. And then you said, well, one of it was the ability to be flexible, to be agile, be growing and be better 1%. And so you're saying, okay, if we believe this, the hypothesis behaviors are going to lead to the results we want, how do we create a support system for those behaviors? Rather than just print out the big statements on the walls, you're saying no, we're going to be more thoughtful, and instead of also leaving people to their own devices of like figure out the program, figure out your development play, go figure out how you want to grow, you're saying no, not everyone can just figure it out,
I think there's
right? And
a lot around sort of like you are in charge of your career and you are in charge of your destiny. So we want people to feel empowered to sort of drive their own career at Relay. I think we acknowledge that that's really hard, right? To your point, like to say you're in charge, here's the career frameworks or the pathways, there's so many opportunities is only part of the story because there's so many demands on whether you're an individual contributor or a manager because we've gone from 60 to almost 225 people in a year, just the sheer head count. And what that means for people leaders in terms of who they manage and how they manage has like radically changed. And so, yes, like we have to give them the latitude to go and be curious and learn and experiment, give them the mandate and autonomy to do that, and also provide some support infrastructure around them so that they don't feel alone, that they feel supported, and they feel confident in kind of doing the work that we're asking them to do.
Right. Yeah, I love spreading the weight. I think it's a little unfair to just put this on the people because they are part of the system. They're spending their 80% of their, right? So why not to create the system in a way that encourages the behavior you want to see, right? And don't just let it fall on humans,
Yeah.
right? Because then everyone wins. Like if you have the system that helps them kind of grow and remember to invest in their development and show up their best selves, and they match it with the efforts, then you truly have a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you kind of saying we're
And
investing in that. Yeah.
we launched the coaching. So we launched the search. We hired our director of talent enablement, and she started in 20 early 2024, so in January. So we're still in what I would call like our first year of learning a ton about how big the cohort should be, how long the coaching initial kind of coaching engagement should be. So we're very much in like version one of what it looks like at Relay. But we know also from like the ROI perspective, anecdotally, like where our leaders are staying, they have deeper relationships with their folks. The ones that went through the coaching program or are in the coaching program have higher trust and are more like are having more impact in the business. And so again, these are lagging indicators, but showing, signals and evidence that was the right level of investment, enough so that we're going to add to the investment to make sure that more people can experience the coaching program, and importantly, that our people leaders become great coaches to their team members.
Amazing. I personally arrived to a similar conclusion of where I think coaching skills. I also would say facilitation skills, the skills of the on the future for the leaders because of what you said. Like things are just so unpredictable now, and the technology is evolving so fast that the organizations have to pivot a lot more. Not just in tech. This is everywhere. This is just our life. Just the change has changed. The
Yeah,
speed of change has changed. And so when I think of leaders, it's really about how can you manage yourself and show up and manage yourself so that you can give actually to someone else. And then I love like honestly the skills of the coaching, right? Like becoming because that's always valuable because you can't always know all the details and all the context. That's how you elevate and hire smarter people and help them make sure that you get all the smarts out of them. Like this is where you get
yeah,
most of the brains. And the same for facilitation,
yeah.
because I think that's how you get the most out of the brains, the amazing talent you have hired. And that's how you make sure people choose to participate in what's going on and not feel like they're always just told what to do and they just comply and they give you the discretionary efforts then.
I think there's also this sort of sustainability piece. Like this is the work that we're doing as a scale up is really hard, right? We're basically running a sprint every day,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting. And so we want to figure out how we lead differently so that it doesn't feel like a constant sprint, and so that people can endure and thrive. One of the things that has always bothered me about startups, frankly, or sure just anything that any or company that's venture backed and relies on equity and options is a big component of their total rewards or compensation package, is that equity vests over 4 years on it. Most equity. I don't, I think it's pretty standard. And average tenure at a tech startup is anywhere between like 1 and 2 years, depending on the
Yeah.
segment of tech. And so basically, most people are not getting even, they're getting a quarter to a half of what they're entitled to. And so, like, how do we do it differently so that people stay and thrive so that they're rewarded for all of that hard work, and that they can like mentally sustain that, because it's tough. It's hard work. It's very rewarding work, but I would, I always tell people in interviews and as we're closing, like, this is going to be crazy, but it is so worth it. But you got to know that it's going to be hard work, and you got to be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And so that's, if people are going to do that, show up in that way for us, what are we doing to show up for them?
What do we do to shop for them? I love that. And so, what's been some lesson learned that someone, if they're thinking of starting a program, that what are some lessons do you think they can borrow from you?
The things that I'm really pleased that we did were, one, we started with a more senior hire. When this role launched, I spoke with folks that were kind of developing coaches and had focused mostly on onboarding. And then we met with Amanda, who is ultimately became our director of enablement. She was director level, quite senior, knows way more about how to build a great coaching and enablement practice, like people enablement practice. And so I think that having that senior leader come in, build rapport and relationships across the org, and really partner with her to develop the strategy was a game changer. And also, so you mentioned earlier, like, we put our money where our mouth was. Like, we didn't just sort of, we're gonna invest in this one coach. We basically invested with, like, the leader of the practice to start with. And so
Mm,
that was something that I would 100% do again, and she has been a huge unlock for talent. I can't speak more highly of her and just how she shows up also in her work and her work ethic. Starting with our people leaders was controversial in so far as that we had talked about investing in the coaching program. We had already had, a team of around 60, 65 when Amanda joined, and I think everybody wanted access to her, right? And that wasn't possible for her to go deep and really do the necessary work. And so we said, hey, this is going to be for people leaders only. That I don't know, anecdotally, I don't think it was they understood, but they didn't love it. um, and so I think it was the right step because managers will, will have the ability to really unlock for all the people that they support. That said, if you had, maybe we could have done sort of two and had a more senior person working on the strategy and coaching our more senior leaders,
right.
and then kind of a separate kind of more, I don't call it junior, but a different individual that was focused on ICs or another cohort to kind of maximize the coaching impact. Those are probably the 2. I think, I said earlier, we're still learning, and we're adding another headcount. So I think we'll learn even more once we're able to kind of work with more relayers. But, yeah, those are the early 2 that I would say are my reflections.
Very cool. I was thinking as you were saying, I was like, you know what I love hearing is that there was so much demand for it.
Yeah.
That, like, I think that's something, anyone listening, you need to build. Like, you have to be also following where people are and what they're asking for, right? And I think there's a lot more openness now to people understanding that coaching is helpful and asking for it.
It doesn't surprise me at all that there was demand because that's the type of person that we look for and
Right.
right? The get 1% better, the learner, the curiosity, the humility in learning, that is absolutely what
Mm,
we look for in our team. And so I knew, and like I knew implicitly that once we rolled this out, that there would be a lot of hands up. And so we'd be saying no to more than we could say, yes to because of our value. Like this was a program that was directly in line with a core value and a promise we were making to our team. And you mentioned sort of companies will say they're one thing but do another. We actually didn't roll out our employer branding and like what we stood for until after this launch because we wanted to say we've got all this in place to show or to demonstrate that we truly want people to do the best work of their career here. And here's what what we've organized, whether it's programmatically or workplace strategy, or here are all the components of what we have to offer relayers that really underscore that commitment and that desire to make this a place where you do the best work of your career. It's very authentic.
right. And it's, because you talked about the talent, you said, well, here's the efforts to like make sure talent stays, but this is the effort that also attract the right talent in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're saying, no, there's something that we just we're upfront saying we're hiring for this values,
Mhm.
right? And we're matching, we're saying we're going to support further expression of these values,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I guess for you it wasn't surprising because it's all the people who are willing to grow and want to help
Yeah.
and in growth and are committed to it.
Yeah.
All right, amazing. And so now this is, I guess, almost a year in the making. So this is your kind of
Yes,
your
we
soon.
well, so Amanda joined in January and probably we took her a month for us to, show the plan to the leadership team, get all the necessary buy-in and launch. I think it's in February, it'll be a year. Yeah.
Right. And so you're saying the focus was on people leaders, and now with the additional headcount, you're going to start thinking of how do you scale up kind of like the
Yeah, I think
coaching
there's
available.
there's a few elements. We were gonna continue our leadership development because over the course of the last 8 months or so, 10 months since this launched, we've added a lot more people leaders. So we need to get them through the coaching program as well. But there's also sort of group coaching that we want to start rolling out. What are kind of key themes that we're seeing as areas of opportunity for growth and development that we want to bring groups together to learn from each other, to also, be facilitated or go through that experience with a coach. And then also looking, being a leader is different from a people leader. For us, a people leader is someone who's responsible for the career and the growth of individuals. That's why the word people is in front of it. But we have a lot of leaders at Relay who are pioneers, who are just, in with the customers, building product. And so we want to actually support leaders broadly. And and those leaders have a lot of influence. They mentor, but they're not necessarily managing. And so we want to offer coaching opportunities for anyone who wants to lead at Relay, whether it's in an individual contributor role or a manager role.
Right. Very cool. I love that you're recognizing kind of like the different types of people, right? Because sometimes, uh, I think it's a mistake that so many of us learned and yet still continue kind of doing it, not figuring out the better way, where we know some people are not meant to lead in a people management way, but they still go down that path because that's the only path for growth
Yeah.
and for what they feel the expression of leadership, where you say, no, you can be a very impactful leader. You're
Yeah.
still a leader in a different way where we magnify your strengths, but you don't have to always manage people for that. And we're going to offer you the same support, or like, same coaching support.
Mhm.
What's interesting? I love that you said also cohort and group coaching,
Mhm.
because that's a whole different level of humility. One thing is to be able to open up and just like one-on-one conversations, the door closed between you and the coach. And I think that's completely different. Like for me, for example, like why I love working with teams. It's when you see others around you open up and when you're responsible for creating safe space for others. And when I always compare it to like a fitness class. I don't know if you do group fitness, but sometimes like I do group fitness and I would show up to a class sometimes and I'm exhausted and I'm like, I'll just do this much. And then you have the next person to you and she's going like all in. And somehow out of nowhere, you start jumping an inch higher and you're
Yeah.
lifting bigger weights. And I was like, what just happened? That wasn't even I thought was possible for me today, right? I think the same energy happens when you bring the group together, whether it's a team or like group coaching, where you start building on each other's efforts and energy. And also you start building, I think, this magical connections with being vulnerable with each other.
Yeah. I think the key word that you just shared is magic. We're trying to build something really magical for our team, and that's in like the relationships and the learning and the ability to be raw and authentic with each other, to support each other and being better leaders and is one piece. And then I think there's other like there's confidence that you're not alone. There's this,
Mm,
um and I was it's certainly I'll speak from my own experience earlier on when I moved into kind of a people capacity is that I felt like, one, I was alone, I didn't have anyone to talk to, that my mistakes were just my mistakes, right? That I was the flawed person and that nobody else was experiencing these things, and that in of itself is completely wrong, and so I think there's this opportunity to say, you are not alone. I may be an engineering manager, and this may be a marketing manager, and this may be a customer support manager, but we're all facing some of the same challenges. Like, how do we attack the problem differently? And what do we learn from each other? And at the end of the day, I think that you're not alone also gives you confidence to be better. And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do is say, it's okay. You got this, and you got a whole group of people who have your back and what have ideas for how you can continue to grow as a leader.
right. And you don't end up spiraling down. It's just me. I made a
Yeah.
mistakes. Everyone else has it figured out, right? You have this like, no, we're all learning, we're all doing it. And you're gonna, you don't allow yourself to go there with the
Yeah.
support of this like system. All
Yeah.
right, Lorena, I have a final question for you. I really appreciate, first of all the insights. And I have a question I ask every participant in my interview is, imagine this interview goes viral and everybody gets to hear what Lorena wants to share with the world, what would be that thing you want to be shared?
I think it's in line with the what we just talked about in coaching, and you did prep me for this, and I was thinking, and I mentioned earlier that somebody that's inspired me is my father, and he is still learning. He turned 81 this past week. I got to go visit him. He's going to be very angry that I revealed his age, but he is a learner. He's curious and he's humble, and I think the coaching program, my career journeys, and some of the risks I've taken have been a product of curiosity. And so I hope that if in listening or, spending time kind of hearing our conversation, that people are inspired to be more curious and continue learning. Because for me, it's made all the difference in being in places and doing work I love, meeting incredible people that have changed my life. And so I'm thankful that I got that from my father, and I would love to pass that on to others.
All right, world, you have it now. The key of the curiosity was learning. What an inspiration to hear that you're always learning, even in your 70s, your 80s, and so on, right? It's the humbleness of it and the openness of it is truly inspiring. I really appreciate your time, Lorena.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. Yeah, I even got to talk about my dad. What a day. It's perfect. Thank you.
Amazing.